What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So, interesting topic for today's video. I was talking to a buddy of mine some time ago, and he was asking me some advice about buying a vintage acoustic guitar. And I had some thoughts for him, and that's kind of the premise of this video, is my thoughts on vintage acoustic guitars in general. So, for some reason, I find myself actually having a few different vintage acoustic guitars in the studio at the moment. Two of them are mine that I own, and then one of them is one I've been doing some repairs on and setting up for someone. And that, coupled with the conversation with my buddy about buying a vintage acoustic, kind of got me thinking about the pros and cons of vintage acoustic instruments versus modern acoustic instruments in particular. You know, we talk about electric guitars a lot, and one of the things that kind of translates both ways is this topic of like vintage versus modern, but I think it's even more exaggerated when you get to acoustic guitars. The biggest issue with vintage instruments in general is cost and upkeep, or having to be repaired like from the get-go. Not even upkeep, but just like, you know, A, they're expensive, B, they probably have issues. So that's with electric guitars, but even more so with acoustics. I find, just from my experiences working on guitars, that vintage acoustic instruments all seem to have issues. I mean, I haven't come across one that didn't have some kind of quirky thing about it. So, I guess what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you the vintage acoustic guitars I have here, talk about kind of some of the issues I've come across, and then I'll show you a modern acoustic guitar and why I think you should go one way or the other. So the first guitar we'll look at, because this is kind of similar to the guitar my buddy was talking about buying, was he wanted something like this. He wanted like a 60s Gibson J25 or like an LG1 or something like that, which is what this is. This is mine. This is my 1961 Gibson LG1. It's LG1. Couldn't remember if it was LG1 or LG2. This is LG1. And I love this guitar. My granddad gave me this guitar when I was probably 16 or 17 years old. And my dad bought it for him a long time ago. So it's kind of a neat, you know, kind of full circle thing. So that's what's cool about this guitar. You know, being a 17-year-old kid, there's no way I was going to go out and buy something like this, right? But my granddad gave it to me. And part of the reason he gave it to me was because he was in a band, and he needed a guitar he could play in his band. He needed an acoustic guitar. He wanted an acoustic guitar that had a tuner built into it, an EQ on it, and, you know, a pickup so that he could plug into a PA system, right? And this didn't have any of that stuff. So he bought him like a brand new something, I think it was an Alvarez acoustic, and this was just sitting around his house, and it had some issues, and so he gave it to me. It was playable, but, you know, you wouldn't want to take it out and gig it, right? So I wound up just kind of sitting around with this guitar for years. You know, I'd play it at the house and stuff, but I wanted to take it out and play it. So I had to do a lot of work to this guitar, and it still needs a little bit of work. I had to put a new nut on it. I had to put a new saddle in the bridge. I had to refret the guitar. It was missing an inlay, so I had to replace an inlay in the guitar. It needs new tuning keys really bad. These tuning keys are, you know, they get there, but they get there, right? And I put a pickup in it. I put an LR Baggs Elemental pickup system in it. So I did a lot of work on this guitar to get it to where it plays comfortably, it sounds nice, you can take it out and plug it up. But one of the other issues this guitar has, see if this translates on camera, it has a crack right here, right along the edge of the fretboard, right here. There is a crack. And, you know, I've repaired it a couple times and it pops back open. I put a cleat underneath it and it popped back open. And I just haven't wanted to, like, really get in there and mess with it because it's not a huge deal. It's one of the things you run into with vintage acoustic guitars is there's a, the wood that makes up these bodies is so thin. Over time, they all crack. I've never seen a vintage acoustic guitar that didn't have a repaired crack on it somewhere, right? Like, the other thing that happens on them, this one's not bad. This one's not bad at all because I've really taken care of it over the years, but the tops like to bow. The string tension likes to pull the bridge up, and sometimes the bridge just comes off. But most of the time, the top part right here just gets a bow to it, which makes your action really bad. So over the years, I've progressively gotten lighter and lighter with my string gauges. I've had to cut the saddle down a lot to kind of compensate some of the bow that's happened over the years, right? A lot of upkeep, just, a lot going on, right? To deal with this 63-year-old guitar, right? That's about how old this guy is. And it sounds great and it plays great and I love it. But it's not the most practical thing to be hauling around to gigs and stuff, and, they're expensive. So that's a con, a few cons actually for a vintage acoustic. The other guitar that I have here, now this is a really great guitar. This is a 1975 Martin D28, and this isn't mine. This belongs to a friend of my dad's, and I just did a whole bunch of work on it for him. And this might be the best sounding acoustic guitar I've ever played. I'm not even gonna lie. This guitar sounds huge and it plays great, but again, it's a 1975 Martin. The big thing is it doesn't have any electronics in it or anything like that, so you can't take it out to a gig somewhere and just plug it straight into the PA system. So that's a bunch of work if you want to do that. This guitar also doesn't have a truss rod in it because Martin didn't start putting truss rods in their guitars till the 80s. So there's no truss rod in this guitar. So the neck is straight for now, but one day it won't be. Something will happen eventually, right? So that's a big thing there. This guitar doesn't need a refret. Frets are good on it. It's got a huge neck. The neck is massive. Yes, it sounds great, but it's got a little bit of a bow going on. Action's starting to get a little high down here at the hilt. It has a crack in it that I filled in with glue and touched up with some nitrocellulose just to, seal it and cover it up, keep it from growing anymore, right? So, again, an amazing sounding guitar, a beautiful guitar. But is it something you really want to take out and play and gig with? And that's kind of the conversation that I was having with my buddy. He was like, I want a guitar I can take to open mics and stuff. And he's got a little kid. And he's like, I want a guitar I can kind of just leave in a stand and not have to worry about. It's like, yeah, I know everybody wants their dream vintage guitar. But if you're just looking for something that you can take out and play and be comfortable with, vintage acoustic guitars, in my opinion, are not it. They're not that. They come with a litany of issues. And so my buddy, the one he was looking at, he found one and it had a whole bunch of issues. It needed a refret. The top was bowed. Like, kind of classic acoustic guitar issues like we've been talking about. And they're great. I love vintage acoustic guitars because they, over time, as the wood settles in and everything kind of just starts to agree with itself after years and years and years, nothing sounds like an old vintage acoustic guitar. They have their own thing to them. But, there's a lot more to it than just that, right? Maybe if you have a really nice controlled studio setting where that guitar is going to live and you're just going to put a nice mic in front of it and record it, absolutely, yes. Get you a vintage acoustic guitar. That would be great. But if you're going to take it in and out of clubs and venues and bars and open mic nights and all that kind of stuff, probably not the guitar for you, right? So, the opposite end of the spectrum here is going to be, like, this is my Cremona. Which one is this again? This is a R30E. This is a very similar kind of build as the D28. This guitar sounds really good too. But yeah, this guy, no cracks or anything like that. Really nice, like Graphtec bridge pins and nut and saddle. It's got the LR Baggs element system, right out of the box. It's got this pickup system in it, all this Graphtec stuff on it. Tuning stability is great. It plays great. It's got a truss rod in it. You can go buy something like this and have a great sounding acoustic guitar, and it'll have all these kind of modern features to it, and it'll have this reliability factor to it. Not to mention it'll have like a manufacturer's warranty, or maybe even the store you buy it from has their own kind of warranty, right? Like, there's so many benefits of buying a brand new guitar over a used one or even a vintage one, so what's the point of this video, right? The point is to help you make an educated decision, and not just to tell you, yes, go out there and buy a vintage guitar because vintage guitars are the best, right? I don't really believe that. I don't believe vintage guitars are the best just because they're old. There's a lot of old duds. There just is. I've played a lot of old guitars that weren't great. I played a lot of new guitars that were awesome. I played a lot of old guitars that were awesome. I've played a lot of new guitars that weren't, right? Being new or old doesn't have anything to do with it. You can find good ones and bad ones on either side of that, that spectrum, right? So this is really just about helping you make an informed decision. If you just absolutely have to have your vintage dream acoustic guitar, by all means go and get it, right? But understand that vintage acoustic guitars they seem to have a lot more issues than vintage electric guitars do. Just the nature of them. They get dried out, the tops crack, the hill right here sometimes where the fretboard comes over the neck, sometimes it lifts up. The back bout likes to bow from string tension. Sometimes the bridges come off. Sometimes bracing falls out, right? Like, I've seen everything. I've seen all kinds of stuff, right? You get old Martins with warped necks you can't do anything about because they don't have truss rods, right? Like, you can run into so many things, and when you're buying especially if you're buying offline, you might not be able to really verify everything. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're kind of SOL, right? If you can go to a reputable shop and you can find a vintage acoustic guitar that has a good provenance, you know where it came from, you know how it was taken care of, right? By all means, if that's the thing you want, then go for it. But if you just want something that's going to be reliable, that you can play every day, especially if you're a geeky musician, I don't think vintage guitars in general, but especially acoustics, I don't think vintage acoustic guitars are the way to go. Get you something more modern. There's a lot of great acoustic companies. I work for one. But Gibsons, modern Gibsons are great. Modern Epiphones are great. Modern Martins are great. There's so many awesome modern acoustic guitar companies. You can find something out there that is going to tick all the boxes for you, I promise. So, hope you guys like that video. Maybe that'll, help educate you a little bit on your next acoustic guitar purchase. Do vintage acoustic guitars sound really good? Yeah, when you find one that does, it really does. Like I said, this Martin, I picked this up a week or so ago from the guy, and it, the strings are kind of high. I had to sand the saddle down a little bit. The guitar was like real cloudy looking, and it looked like it'd been sitting in a case for years. The strings looked like they were from 1975 too, right? But once I got it cleaned up and I was able to sand the saddle down a little bit, lower the action, and get some new strings on it, this might be the best sounding acoustic guitar I've ever heard. I don't know how well this is translating over the camera mic, but my gosh, this... Yeah, this thing is a cannon. So, I'm not going to sit here and lie about either side of the debate, right? I'm not going to tell you having a vintage acoustic guitar ain't worth it, because this thing sounds awesome and it's totally worth what it's worth. I would definitely pay this amount of money to have this guitar. But if I was just looking for one acoustic guitar that was going to be giggable and roadworthy and dependable and reliable, it wouldn't be this at all. No matter how good it sounds. It would be something way more like this, because this still sounds really good. And I don't have to worry about it or, be concerned about carrying it out of the house or anything like that. So, hope you guys liked the video. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you own any vintage acoustic guitars or modern ones, especially if you own both. Let me know how you feel about it. So, hope you guys liked the video. I'll be back soon.